The year was 1873 when the Mojave dust settled on Amelia Dawson's boots as she stood before the town sheriff's office, clutching a bundle of papers that would either save her land or condemn her to ruin. The Arizona Territory's sun beat down mercilessly, but not nearly as harsh as the stares from townsfolk who whispered as she passed. A woman with no husband, living alone on the edge of town, speaking to creatures no one else could see, such peculiarities had earned her a reputation that spread like wildfire across the parched landscape. "Miss Dawson," Sheriff Miller's gravelly voice greeted her as she entered his office. His mustache twitched with discomfort. "I'm afraid those papers won't change anything. The Baxter Mining Company has legal claim to that land now." "Legal?" Amelia's voice remained steady despite the trembling in her hands. "There's nothing legal about forged documents and midnight threats, Sheriff." Miller sighed, leaning back in his creaking chair. "Miss Dawson, I understand you're upset, but these accusations, they're not helping your case. People are already talking." "Let them talk," she replied, her green eyes flashing. "I know what I've seen. The ghosts again." Miller asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Or was it the spirits in the well this time? Amelia gathered her papers, spine straightening. At 26, she'd endured worse than a dismissive lawman. "The land belonged to my father, and now it's mine." "Those men have no right." "Those men," Miller interrupted, "have money and connections. You have peculiar notions." He lowered his voice. "For your own safety, Miss Dawson, consider selling what claim you think you have and move on before things get unpleasant." As Amelia stepped back onto the dusty Main Street, she felt the weight of a dozen stares. The shopkeeper's wife pulled her child closer as Amelia passed. The saloon fell momentarily silent as she walked by its swinging doors. "Madwoman," someone muttered, loud enough for her to hear. She quickened her pace, her worn boots kicking up dust as she headed toward the livery to collect her horse. The weight of isolation pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than the midday sun. "Madam, need your mare saddled?" The unexpected kindness in the voice made her turn. A man she didn't recognize stood in the stable doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. Not a local, she concluded, noting his practical but trail-worn attire. "Yes, thank you," she replied cautiously. "The bay with the white star." He nodded, disappearing into the shadowy interior. When he returned leading her horse, the animal seemed unusually calm in his presence. Most men struggled with Penny's temperamental nature. "She's a good mare," he remarked, stroking the horse's neck. "Spirited but true." "She's particular about who handles her," Amelia said, surprise evident in her voice. The stranger smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Animals know who means them harm and who doesn't. Name's Jackson O'Malley, madam, just passing through." "Amelia Dawson." She offered her name hesitantly, waiting for the flicker of recognition, the change in his expression when someone local whispered in his ear about the mad Dawson woman. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Dawson." He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. As Amelia mounted her horse, she noticed 3 men watching from across the street. Baxter Mining Company men, their expressions making their intentions clear. Jackson noticed her attention shift and turned to observe the men, his posture subtly changing. "Friends of yours?" he asked quietly. "Quite the opposite," she replied. Jackson's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed the situation. "Need an escort home, Miss Dawson?" Under normal circumstances, Amelia would have refused. She'd learned to depend on no one but herself, but something in his straightforward manner gave her pause. "It's a fair distance," she warned. "I've got nowhere particular to be," he replied, already moving to saddle his own horse, a sturdy Palomino gelding with intelligent eyes. They rode out of town side by side, the mining company men watching but not following. Once the town disappeared behind them, the vast Arizona landscape opened up mesquite, saguaro, and the distant purple mountains standing sentinel against the endless sky. "You're not from Mojave," Amelia observed, breaking the companionable silence. "No, madam, been drifting since the war." His voice held no self-pity, just statement of fact. "Texas originally, then wherever work took me. Cattle drives mostly, some ranch work." "A cowboy," she said with the ghost of a smile, "when circumstances require it." His easy demeanor belied the watchful alertness in his eyes as he scanned the horizon. "Those men back there they trouble?" Amelia hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing her burdens. "They work for Harrison Baxter. He wants my land for mining, and you don't want to sell." "It's not for sale," she said firmly. "My father built that place from nothing. It's all I have left of him." She paused, "But it's more than sentiment. There's something important there, something worth protecting." She waited for the questions, the skepticism. Instead, Jackson merely nodded. "A person's land is their own business." As they crested a small rise, Amelia's property came into view, a modest homestead nestled against rocky foothills with a small creek running nearby. A vegetable garden, a corral, a weathered but well-maintained house. Not grand by any measure, but clearly tended with care. "It's not much," she said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's good land," Jackson observed. "Water, shelter, defensible position." The assessment came naturally, and Amelia recognized it as the evaluation of a man who'd lived rough and knew what mattered. As they approached the homestead, Amelia felt a familiar tingle at the back of her neck. She glanced toward the ancient cottonwood that stood sentinel near the creek. To most eyes, nothing would appear unusual, but Amelia saw them translucent figures gathered in the tree's shade, watching with ancient, patient eyes. Instinctively, she knew Jackson couldn't see them. No one ever did. But to her surprise, his gaze followed hers, and a curious expression crossed his face. "That tree's seen a lot of years," he said quietly. Before Amelia could respond, the sound of hoofbeats approached from the south. 3 riders appeared, dust billowing behind them. Amelia recognized them immediately, Baxter's men, the same ones who'd been watching in town. Jackson moved his horse slightly in front of hers, a subtle protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "Miss Dawson," called the lead rider, a sharp-faced man named Curtis. "Mr. Baxter sent us with his final offer." His eyes flickered to Jackson, evaluating the potential threat. "As I told Mr. Baxter yesterday, and the day before, and every day for the past month, this land is not for sale," Amelia replied, her voice carrying across the distance between them. Curtis's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Baxter thought you might be more reasonable today, considering the circumstances." "And what circumstances would those be?" Jackson asked, his tone conversational but with an edge that made Curtis straighten in his saddle. "Not your concern, stranger," Curtis snapped, then returned his attention to Amelia. "The sheriff signed off on the new survey. This land's been reclassified for mining rights." Amelia felt her heart sink. "That's impossible. The territorial court granted my father permanent homestead rights." Curtis reached into his coat and produced an official-looking document. "Times change, Miss Dawson. Mr. Baxter's offering fair compensation out of respect for your father, but with or without your cooperation, work starts next week." Jackson studied the men carefully. 3 men riding out to deliver papers seems excessive, must be important documents. One of the other men, younger, with a nervous energy about him, shifted uncomfortably. "We're just doing our job." "And what job would that be?" Jackson asked mildly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like intimidation." Curtis's face hardened. "Like I said, not your business." He tossed the envelope toward Amelia. It landed in the dust near her horse's hooves. "Read it and be sensible, Miss Dawson. Everyone in town knows you're not altogether stable." "Wouldn't want things to get difficult." As the men turned their horses to leave, Curtis called over his shoulder, "We'll be back tomorrow for your answer." When they'd ridden out of earshot, Amelia dismounted and retrieved the envelope, her hands trembling slightly as she broke the seal. Jackson remained on his horse, giving her privacy while keeping watch on the departing riders. "They're lying," she said after scanning the document. "This survey is falsified. The boundaries are all wrong." "Wouldn't be the first time money changed hands for convenient paperwork," Jackson observed. He dismounted, leading his horse toward the water trough. "You said the sheriff won't help?" Amelia laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Miller gets his pay from the town council." "The town council gets their direction from Harrison Baxter." She folded the paper carefully. "Besides, they all think I'm mad already, the crazy Dawson woman who talks to ghosts." She expected Jackson to react, to back away, to look at her differently. Instead, he simply watered his horse, his expression thoughtful. You talk to ghosts, he asked finally, his tone neutral. Amelia hesitated. This was the moment that usually ended whatever fragile connection she might have made with another person. I see things others don't, she said carefully. My grandmother called it the sight, my father understood it, everyone else. She shrugged, the gesture conveying years of misunderstanding and isolation. Jackson nodded slowly. My mother's people had seers, they were respected, not feared. His simple acceptance stunned her. For a moment, Amelia couldn't find words. They're here now, aren't they? He asked, nodding toward the cottonwood tree. That's why you looked over there when we arrived. Yes, she admitted, relief washing through her at being able to speak the truth aloud. They've always been here. They protected this land long before my father built this house. And that's why you won't leave. They showed me what's beneath the ground, she explained, warming to his interest. Not gold or silver like Baxter thinks, something older, sacred. She hesitated, then continued, there's a cave system under the eastern ridge. Inside are paintings, thousands of years old, if mining starts. They'll destroy it, Jackson finished for her. Amelia nodded. I've tried to explain, but no one will listen. Who would believe the mad Dawson woman? Jackson looked around the homestead, taking in the modest but well-tended property, then back to Amelia's determined face. Something in his expression softened. Well, Miss Dawson, he said quietly, if seeing what others can't is madness, then perhaps the world could use more madness. Then madness is mercy, she replied, the words coming to her from somewhere deep and instinctual. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Amelia felt truly seen. You should go, she said reluctantly, breaking the moment. Baxter's men will be back, and they won't be bringing just papers next time. Probably not, Jackson agreed, but made no move to leave, which is why I think I'll stay a while if it's all the same to you. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Amelia found herself with an unexpected ally. They settled her horses for the night and prepared a simple meal together, the domesticity of the routine strange but comforting after so many years alone. Over supper, Jackson shared stories of his travels, cattle drives in Texas, a winter in Colorado, encounters with people both good and bad across the changing landscape of the West. He spoke plainly, without embellishment, but his words painted vivid pictures. Amelia found herself smiling more than she had in months. What about you? He asked as they sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the deepening blue of the sky. How did you come to be here alone? Amelia's fingers absently traced the worn wood of her chair's armrest, smoothed by years of her father's touch. My father died 2 winters ago, pneumonia. My mother passed when I was young. She paused, the memories both precious and painful. Father taught me everything: how to shoot, how to farm, how to survive. We kept to ourselves mostly. My differences made town visits difficult. It couldn't have been easy, Jackson observed. It wasn't, she admitted, but we had each other. She looked out at the darkened landscape, feeling the presence of the spirits that had become her only company. After he died, Baxter started making offers. When I refused, the rumors got worse. Suddenly I wasn't just odd, I was dangerous, unstable. Convenient timing, Jackson noted. Very. Amelia sighed. The cave paintings. I've only shown them to one person, Professor Harlow from Tucson. He understood their importance, promised to bring someone from Washington to document them, but his stage was robbed on the way back to Tucson. He was killed. Jackson's expression darkened. That's mighty unfortunate timing as well. Yes, Amelia agreed grimly. His notes about this place disappeared. No one else knows what's here except me, and now you. The implication hung in the night air between them. By sharing this knowledge, she'd potentially put him in danger too. I should show you, she said suddenly, making a decision. Tomorrow, so you understand what's at stake. Jackson nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. I'd like that. As they prepared for the night, Amelia made Jackson a bed on the sofa. The simple presence of another human in her home after so long alone felt strangely disorienting yet comforting. Thank you, she said as he settled in, for not thinking me mad. He looked up at her, his expression serious. The world's full of things we don't understand, Miss Dawson. I've seen enough to know that dismissing what we can't explain is a fool's approach to life. Amelia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Good night, Mr. O'Malley." "Jackson," he corrected gently. "Jackson," she echoed, the name feeling right on her lips. "Good night." That night, Amelia dreamed of the ancient ones who guarded the land, not frightening as others might imagine, but wise and watchful, with eyes that had witnessed centuries pass like breaths. In her dream, they gathered around Jackson as he slept, studying him with curious approval. When she woke at dawn, the memory lingered, giving her a strange sense of hope. She found Jackson already awake, tending to the horses in the corral. He'd started the coffee, and the rich aroma filled the kitchen. Such simple gestures of companionship, yet they moved her deeply. After a quick breakfast, Amelia led Jackson toward the eastern ridge, following a narrow trail that wound through mesquite and boulder fields. The morning air still held coolness, but the promise of heat shimmered on the horizon. "Not many would recognize this path," she explained as they picked their way through the rocky terrain. "My father discovered it by accident, tracking a wounded coyote." "Your father sounds like a remarkable man," Jackson observed, helping her over a particularly steep section. "He was." Amelia smiled at the memory. "He came west with nothing, built everything with his own hands, but more than that, he was kind. When he first found the caves and realized what they contained, he was in awe. He understood immediately that some things deserve protection." They reached a sheer rock face that appeared to be a dead end. Amelia moved confidently to a narrow crevice partly hidden by overgrown brush. "We have to go single file from here. Watch your head." The passage twisted sharply, plunging them into shadow, then opened suddenly into a high-ceilinged chamber. Shafts of sunlight pierced through small openings in the rock above, illuminating portions of the walls in golden light, and on those walls wonder. Generations of hands had created a tapestry of images that flowed around the chamber. Handprints in ochre red, hunting scenes with deer and men carrying spears, geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with hidden meaning, spirit beings with elongated limbs and antlered heads dancing across stone. "My God," Jackson breathed, turning slowly to take in the panorama of ancient art. Amelia watched his face, savoring his genuine amazement. The paintings continue through several chambers. Some are so old the pigments have become part of the stone itself. Jackson approached one wall reverently, studying a scene of figures gathered around what appeared to be a spring. "Who made these?" "The people before," my father called them. "The spirits told me they were here long before the Apache, before anyone we have names for." Amelia ran her fingers near, but not touching, an image of a bird in flight. "This is their story, their hunts, their ceremonies, their understanding of the world." Jackson moved deeper into the chamber, following the narrative flow of the images. "And Baxter would destroy all this for minerals." "He doesn't know about the caves specifically," Amelia clarified, "but his mining operation would collapse this whole system. The vibrations alone would damage the paintings, and if they blast—" She didn't need to finish. The consequence was clear in the reverent silence of the cave. "There's more," Amelia said, leading him to a narrow passage at the back of the chamber. "This is what the spirits are most concerned about protecting." The passage opened into a smaller, perfectly round chamber. Unlike the previous space, this room contained only one image, a spiraling pattern that started at the center of the floor and worked its way up the walls to converge at an opening in the ceiling, where a single shaft of light penetrated. "It's a calendar," Amelia explained. During certain times of the year, the light hits specific points in the spiral. The old ones used it to mark seasons, ceremonies. Jackson stood speechless in the center of the chamber, understanding dawning on his face. "This isn't just art, it's knowledge." "Knowledge that's survived thousands of years," Amelia agreed. "The spirits say this place keeps balance. I don't fully understand what they mean, but I know they're afraid of what will happen if it's destroyed." As they exited the caves into the harsh sunlight, Jackson was quiet, processing what he'd seen. Amelia gave him time, leading the way back down the rocky path. Finally, he spoke. "You've been fighting this battle alone." It wasn't a question, but Amelia nodded anyway. "Not anymore," he said simply. They reached the homestead by midday, both lost in thought. As they approached the house, Jackson suddenly raised a hand, signaling for caution. Amelia followed his gaze and saw fresh hoofprints in the dirt near her front door. "Someone's been here," he murmured, drawing his revolver. They approached cautiously, but the homestead appeared deserted. Inside, however, Amelia immediately noticed the disturbance drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor, her father's old desk clearly searched. "They were looking for something," Jackson observed, holstering his weapon after ensuring no one remained in the house. "The deed," Amelia realized, hurrying to a loose floorboard in her bedroom. She pried it up, relief washing over her face as she retrieved a metal box. "It's still here." The original land grant with the proper boundaries. Jackson examined the document carefully when she showed him. This could help, but only if the territorial court will honor it over Baxter's new survey. "The nearest circuit judge won't be through for months," Amelia said, her momentary relief fading. "Baxter said work starts next week." Jackson's expression hardened with resolve. "Then we need to buy time." They spent the afternoon securing the homestead as best they could, checking ammunition, barricading vulnerable windows, planning escape routes if things went badly. Through it all, Amelia found herself watching Jackson, the confident efficiency of his movements, the thoughtful care in his preparations. "You've done this before," she observed as he fashioned an early warning system from tin cans and wire around the perimeter. "Not exactly this," he admitted, "but similar situations. The war taught me some things. The years after taught me more." "Why are you helping me?" she asked abruptly. "You could ride away, avoid the trouble." Jackson paused in his work, considering her question seriously. "I've ridden away from plenty in my life," he said finally. "Some things you just can't ride away from, and this is one of them." His eyes met hers, steady and certain. "Yes, madam, I believe it is." As sunset approached, they shared another simple meal. The air between them had changed, a companionable ease developing despite the looming threat. Amelia found herself speaking of things she'd kept silent for years, her visions, the comfort she took in the spirit world when the human one rejected her. "Sometimes I think they're more real than people," she confessed. "They've never mocked me or called me mad. People fear what they don't understand," Jackson replied. "Fear makes them cruel." "What about you?" she asked. "What makes a man comfortable with ghosts and madwomen?" Jackson smiled, the expression softening the weathered planes of his face. "I told you my mother's people had seers. What I didn't mention was that she was one of them." He gazed into the distance, remembering. "She knew things before they happened, saw people others couldn't see. My father thought it was superstition at first, but he learned to listen when she got that certain look in her eyes." "What happened to them?" Amelia asked gently. "Fever took them both when I was 16. I worked our farm alone for a while, then the war came." His expression clouded. "After that, staying in one place felt impossible. Until now," the question escaped before Amelia could consider its implications. Jackson's eyes returned to her, warm and steady. "Maybe," he said quietly, "maybe until now." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility. Then the warning system jangled, breaking the spell. Both were on their feet instantly, moving to defensive positions. Through the gathering dusk, they could make out riders approaching, at least 5 of them. "More than last time," Amelia observed grimly, checking her rifle. "They're not taking chances," Jackson agreed, positioning himself by the window with a clear view of the approaching men. As the riders drew closer, Amelia recognized Curtis at the lead. The others were Baxter's usual enforcers, rough men hired more for their willingness to intimidate than any mining skills. "Miss Dawson," Curtis called from a safe distance. "Time for your answer." Jackson and Amelia exchanged a glance. She nodded slightly and he stepped out onto the porch, rifle held casually but visibly in his hands. Amelia remained in the doorway, her own weapon ready. "Evening, gentlemen," Jackson called, his tone deceptively pleasant. "Miss Dawson's considering Mr. Baxter's offer, needs a few more days." Curtis sneered. "And who might you be?" "Name's Jackson O'Malley, friend of the lady." "Well, O'Malley, this isn't your concern. Miss Dawson's had plenty of time to be reasonable." Curtis gestured, and his men spread out slightly, a threatening formation. "Mr. Baxter's patience is at an end." "That's unfortunate," Jackson replied coolly. Because Miss Dawson's just beginning to gather evidence for the territorial marshal about claim jumping, forged documents, and possibly murder. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Curtis's face. What nonsense is this? Professor Harlow's notes didn't disappear with his death, Jackson lied smoothly. Copies were sent to officials in Tucson. They're quite interested in what's happening here. Curtis's expression hardened. You're bluffing. Am I? Jackson's smile didn't reach his eyes. The marshal's deputy is due through Mojave next week. We've arranged a meeting. The men exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by this new information. Amelia marveled at Jackson's strategy, introducing just enough doubt to make them hesitate. This changes nothing, Curtis insisted, but his tone lacked conviction. Baxter has legal claim to this land now. Then he won't mind defending that claim to federal authorities, Jackson replied. In the meantime, you're trespassing on Miss Dawson's property. I suggest you leave before this situation becomes unnecessarily complicated. For a tense moment, Amelia thought Curtis might order his men to attack anyway. Instead, he spat on the ground. This isn't over, he growled. Not by a long shot. As the riders retreated into the gathering darkness, Amelia released the breath she'd been holding. That won't stop them for long. No, Jackson agreed, but it might make them cautious. Give us time to think. There is no deputy coming, Amelia pointed out. No copies of Harlow's notes. They don't know that, Jackson replied with a slight smile. Sometimes perception matters more than reality. Later, as they secured the house for the night, Amelia found herself drawn to Jackson in a way that both frightened and exhilarated her. His steady presence, his acceptance of her truth, his willingness to stand beside her all awakened feelings she'd long since buried beneath the necessities of survival. Why did you really stay? She asked as they sat by the dying fire, the question that had lingered in her mind all day finally finding voice. Jackson considered her for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. When I rode into Mojave, I wasn't looking for anything but supplies and maybe a few days' rest before moving on. I've been moving on for years. He paused, searching for words. Then I saw you in town, standing alone against everyone, and something shifted. Pity, she suggested, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Recognition, he corrected gently. I know what it is to stand apart, to carry things others don't understand. His eyes held hers. And when I came here, when I felt this land, saw how you care for it, how it responds to you, I recognized something else. What? Amelia barely breathed the question. That some journeys end where they're meant to, he said simply. That some fights are worth joining. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Years of solitude and suspicion had built walls around her heart, yet this man had somehow slipped past them in mere days. I can't ask you to risk your life for my fight, she whispered. You didn't ask, he reminded her. I chose. The distance between them on the hearth seemed at once vast and non-existent. Amelia was acutely aware of his proximity, of the quiet strength in his hands, of the gentle understanding in his eyes. Besides, he added with a soft smile, they already think you're mad, might as well have company in that madness. Then madness is mercy, she repeated her words from earlier, understanding their meaning more deeply now. In a world that had shown her little kindness, this man's acceptance felt like divine grace. Jackson reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent warmth cascading through her. Yes, he agreed softly, I believe it is. Morning brought no further visits from Baxter's men, but Amelia and Jackson remained vigilant as they tended to the necessary chores around the homestead. Working together established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural, as if they'd been doing this for years rather than days. We need a plan beyond delay tactics, Jackson observed as they repaired a section of corral fence damaged during the previous winter. Amelia handed him nails from her father's old toolbox. I've been thinking about that. The deed might help if we can get it to the right officials, but Baxter has connections throughout the territory. What about the caves themselves? Jackson suggested. If someone with authority saw them, understood their importance. That was Professor Harlow's plan, Amelia reminded him grimly. We saw how that ended. Jackson hammered the last nail into place, then straightened to look at her. "There's a cavalry outpost about 2 days' ride south of here. Captain Warren is known to be fair-minded. If we could get him to come see." Amelia considered this. Baxter might have influence there too. Possibly, Jackson acknowledged, but the army answers to different masters than local officials. It's worth trying. As they discussed options, a familiar tingle ran up Amelia's spine. She turned toward the cottonwood tree where the spirits had gathered more numerously than usual. Their agitation was palpable to her, their translucent forms shifting with unusual urgency. "What is it?" Jackson asked, noticing her attention shift. "The spirits," she murmured. "Something's wrong." She moved toward the tree, drawn by their silent call. Jackson followed a step behind, his eyes scanning the area though she knew he couldn't see what she did. The ancient ones beckoned her toward the creek, their ethereal forms gliding over the rocky ground. Amelia followed, trusting their guidance as she always had. They led her upstream away from the house toward a bend where the water pooled deeper. "What are they showing you?" Jackson asked, keeping pace beside her. Before Amelia could answer, she saw fresh boot prints in the mud by the creek, leading toward the ridge where the cave entrance was hidden. Multiple sets heading in the direction they'd gone yesterday. "Someone's found the caves," she breathed, fear clutching at her heart. They followed the tracks, moving as quickly as the rough terrain allowed. As they neared the ridge, the sound of men's voices carried on the still air. Amelia and Jackson crouched behind boulders, observing the scene below. Curtis and 3 other men stood at the base of the ridge. 2 of them carried mining equipment, pickaxes, shovels, and what appeared to be blasting powder. "Baxter didn't waste any time," Jackson murmured. They watched as Curtis directed the men toward the hidden crevice that led to the caves. The men appeared to know exactly where they were going. "They must have followed us yesterday," Amelia realized, cold dread settling in her stomach. "We need to stop them before they damage the paintings," Jackson said, already calculating odds and angles. "There are 4 of them and 2 of us," Amelia pointed out, though she was already checking her revolver. Jackson's expression was grim but determined. "We have the high ground and surprise. Sometimes that's enough." They moved quickly but carefully along the ridge, positioning themselves above where the men were gathered. Below, Curtis was giving instructions, pointing toward the cave entrance. "Check it thoroughly," they heard him say. "Baxter wants to know exactly what's in there before we start blasting." "Now," Jackson whispered, and they stood simultaneously, weapons trained on the men below. "That's far enough," Amelia called, her voice echoing against the rocks. The men startled, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. Curtis recovered first, his thin face twisting into a sneer when he recognized them. "Well, well, the Madwoman and her new friend," he called back. "You're trespassing on Baxter Mining Company property now. This land belongs to Miss Dawson," Jackson replied evenly. "And those caves are not to be disturbed." One of the miners, a younger man with a nervous demeanor, glanced uncertainly at Curtis. "You didn't say nothing about a gunfight, Curtis. I signed on for mining work." "Shut up, Davis," Curtis snapped, then returned his attention to Amelia and Jackson. "You can't guard this place forever. Sooner or later you'll need to sleep or go to town for supplies, and when you do—" "When we do," Jackson interrupted, "the U.S. Marshal will already be investigating why Baxter's men are trespassing on legally deeded land and threatening its rightful owner." Curtis laughed. "You're still playing that game. There's no marshal coming." "Perhaps not," a new voice called from behind the mining crew, "but I am here now." All eyes turned to see a tall, distinguished man on horseback, accompanied by 2 uniformed cavalry soldiers. The newcomer wore civilian clothes but carried himself with unmistakable authority. "Judge Elliot Parker," the man introduced himself, dismounting smoothly despite his age. "Circuit Court for the Arizona Territory." He surveyed the scene with shrewd eyes. "I received a most interesting letter from the late Professor Harlow shortly before his unfortunate demise." Amelia and Jackson exchanged surprised glances. Curtis and his men looked equally confused. "Harlow sent you a letter," Amelia called down, hope rising in her chest. "Indeed he did, Miss Dawson," the judge confirmed. "Most passionate correspondence about remarkable archaeological discoveries that warranted immediate protection. He turned his stern gaze on Curtis. He also expressed concerns about certain mining interests threatening those discoveries. Curtis's face had drained of color. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. We have legal claim to this land for mining purposes." "So I've heard," Judge Parker replied dryly. "I've also heard evidence suggesting those claims may have been obtained through irregular means. Which is why I've taken a personal interest in this matter." He nodded to the cavalry soldiers. "Captain Warren was kind enough to provide an escort when I explained the situation." The captain, a weathered man with intelligent eyes, touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "The Army has a responsibility to protect significant historical sites, particularly those relating to indigenous peoples." Curtis looked from the judge to the soldiers, clearly recalculating his position. "Mr. Baxter won't be pleased about this interruption." "Mr. Baxter is welcome to present his case properly in my court," Judge Parker replied evenly. "In the meantime, these caves and this property remain undisturbed pending full investigation." His tone left no room for argument. Curtis hesitated, measuring his options, then signaled to his men. "We're leaving. For now." As they retreated, Judge Parker turned his attention to Amelia and Jackson, who had made their way down from their position on the ridge. "Miss Dawson, I presume," the judge said with a slight bow. "Harlow's letter described you as the guardian of this remarkable site. I must say, his descriptions, passionate though they were, hardly prepared me for what I'm told lies within these caves." "You know about the paintings?" Amelia asked, still trying to process this unexpected turn of events. "Only what Harlow described," the judge admitted. "He sent sketches along with his letter, requesting urgent intervention. I was already planning to detour to investigate when I heard rumors of his death." His expression darkened. "Troubling coincidence that." "No coincidence," Jackson stated flatly. Judge Parker nodded gravely. "So I suspect." "Which is why I approached with caution and enlisted Captain Warren's assistance." He looked toward the cave entrance with scholarly interest. "I would very much like to see these paintings for myself, if you're willing to show me." The next hours passed in a blur for Amelia. She led Judge Parker, Captain Warren, and one of the soldiers through the caves, watching with satisfaction as even these worldly men fell silent with awe at what they witnessed. The judge took extensive notes, while Captain Warren sketched several of the more elaborate images with surprising skill. "Extraordinary," Parker murmured repeatedly, examining the calendar room with particular interest. "This is far more significant than even Harlow suggested. Archaeological societies back east would consider this a treasure beyond price. Will it be enough to stop Baxter?" Amelia asked plainly when they emerged from the caves into the late afternoon sunlight. The judge straightened his coat, his expression resolute. "Miss Dawson, I am issuing an immediate injunction against any mining or development activities on or near this property. These caves qualify for federal protection under new statutes concerning historical preservation." Relief washed through Amelia so powerfully that she swayed slightly on her feet. Jackson's hand steadied her elbow, his touch warm and reassuring. "Furthermore," Parker continued, "I will personally review the circumstances surrounding your land deed dispute. If, as I suspect, there have been improprieties, there will be consequences for those responsible." Captain Warren nodded in agreement. "I'll leave 2 men here to ensure no further attempts are made to access the caves until formal protection can be arranged." As they returned to the homestead, Amelia felt a strange lightness, as if a burden she'd carried for years had suddenly lifted. The spirits accompanied them, invisible to all but her, their ancient presence exuding something that felt remarkably like satisfaction. Judge Parker and Captain Warren stayed for a simple dinner, during which the judge shared stories of other archaeological discoveries throughout the territory, ancient pueblos, mysterious artifacts, evidence of civilizations that had flourished and faded long before European arrival. "The history of this land is written in stone and bone, not merely in our paper records," Parker observed. "We lose such knowledge at our peril." After the visitors departed, promising to return the following day with formal documents securing the cave's protection, Amelia and Jackson sat together on the porch, watching twilight paint the desert in purples and golds. How did Harlow manage to send that letter? Amelia wondered aloud. I thought all his papers were taken when he was killed. Jackson considered this, his arm resting comfortably along the back of the bench they shared. Perhaps he sent it before he left here, anticipating trouble. Or perhaps he had help, Amelia suggested softly, her eyes drifting toward the cottonwood where the spirits gathered. The old ones have their ways. Jackson followed her gaze, and for a moment, Amelia thought she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he too glimpsed something in the gathering shadows. Then he smiled, turning back to her. Either way, your fight isn't over, but at least now you have allies. We have allies, she corrected gently, allowing herself to lean slightly against his shoulder. Jackson's arm curved naturally around her, drawing her closer. The contact was innocent yet intimate, a shared moment of peace after days of tension. What happens now? He asked, his voice low in the gathering dusk. Amelia looked up at him, studying the strong lines of his profile against the darkening sky. That depends, she replied carefully. On what? On whether a drifting cowboy might consider staying in one place for a while. She held her breath after the words left her lips, suddenly vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with land disputes or hostile miners. Jackson turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the last golden light of day. I've been moving for so long, he said slowly, running from memories, from connections, from putting down roots that might be torn up again. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with careful deliberation. But this land and you make me want to stop running. Amelia felt a tremor pass through her, equal parts hope and fear. People will still call me mad, she warned. The spirits won't leave just because Baxter's men do. Then madness is mercy, Jackson repeated her words, the phrase becoming something like a promise between them. Besides, he added with a gentle smile, I'm starting to think I might see them too in time. You would stay, she asked, needing the certainty of his words. If you'll have me, he replied simply. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Amelia thought of her years of isolation, of fighting alone, of the empty spaces in the home her father had built. She thought of Jackson's steady presence these past days, how naturally he fit into the rhythm of this place, how he accepted both her strengths and her strangeness. I would have you, she whispered, the words releasing something long caged within her heart. Jackson's hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch reverent. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but when Amelia responded, it deepened into something more certain, a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, the first stars had appeared in the darkening sky. Amelia felt changed, as if something fundamental had shifted within and around her. Near the cottonwood, the spirits watched with ancient, knowing eyes, their approval evident even from a distance. They approve, she murmured, smiling against Jackson's shoulder. Good, he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. I'd hate to start our future with ghostly disapproval. Our future, Amelia thought, savoring the phrase and all it promised. In the days that followed, Judge Parker made good on his promises. Formal documents were drawn up protecting the caves as a historical site of significant archaeological importance. Investigations into Baxter's activities revealed a pattern of fraudulent land acquisitions throughout the territory, resulting in multiple charges and the eventual dismantling of his mining operation. Curtis and several others fled before they could be arrested, but with Baxter's influence shattered, they posed little further threat. The town of Mojave underwent its own reckoning as the judge's investigations revealed how deeply corruption had penetrated local governance. Sheriff Miller resigned in disgrace, replaced by a younger deputy with a stronger moral compass. Gradually, the town's attitude toward Amelia began to shift. Judge Parker's very public endorsement of her as the guardian of the ancestral heritage lent legitimacy to her position. The caves became something of a controlled attraction, with Parker arranging for serious researchers to visit under Amelia's supervision. Through it all, Jackson remained helping to expand the garden, reinforcing the house against winter, becoming as much a part of the homestead as the ancient cottonwood by the creek. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, building on the foundation of mutual respect and understanding that had formed during those first desperate days. On a crisp autumn evening, as they sat by the fire after a day of preserving the garden's harvest, Jackson took Amelia's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled, acknowledging the jest, then continued more seriously. "These past months have been the most peaceful I've known since before the war. Being here with you feels right in a way nothing else has." Amelia's heart quickened at his tone. "It feels right to me too," she replied softly. "I want to make it official," he said, drawing a simple ring from his pocket, a silver band with a small, perfect turquoise stone. "I want to build a life here with you if you'll have me as your husband." Tears sprang to Amelia's eyes as she looked at the ring, then at the man offering it. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Trade with a Navajo silversmith who came through last month," Jackson admitted. "I've been carrying it, waiting for the right moment." Amelia extended her trembling hand. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will have you as my husband." As Jackson slipped the ring onto her finger, Amelia felt the presence of the spirits around them, witnessing this moment as they had witnessed countless human dramas over centuries. But she also felt something new, a sense that she was no longer merely their conduit, their solitary guardian. With Jackson beside her, she had found a bridge between worlds. They were married on the first day of winter, a small ceremony performed by Judge Parker himself, who had become something of a patron and friend. Captain Warren attended, along with a few researchers who had come to respect Amelia's knowledge of the caves and their significance. Even some townsfolk made the journey, curious about the woman they had once feared and the man who had chosen to stand with her. After the guests departed, leaving the newlyweds to their privacy, Amelia and Jackson walked hand in hand to the cottonwood tree. The winter sun was setting early, casting long shadows across the land they now shared in name as well as purpose. "I think I saw one of them today," Jackson said quietly, gazing up at the tree's bare branches. "During the ceremony, just a glimpse, but there was a figure near the creek that wasn't one of our guests." Amelia squeezed his hand, joy filling her heart. "They're welcoming you to their family," she told him. "As am I." That night, as they lay together in the intimate darkness of their bedroom, the barriers between them finally dissolved completely. What had begun as an alliance of necessity had transformed into a love both tender and fierce, a joining of souls who recognized in each other something rare and precious. "They called me a madwoman," Amelia whispered against Jackson's chest as they held each other in the aftermath of their lovemaking. Jackson's arms tightened around her, protective and possessive. "Then madness is mercy," he replied, the words no longer just a phrase but a testament to the unexpected grace that had brought them together. "And I am grateful for it every day." Spring brought new life to the homestead. The garden expanded under their joint care, and Jackson's skill with animals resulted in a small but healthy herd of cattle grazing on the western section of their land. Amelia continued to guide occasional visitors through the caves, her knowledge and connection to the site earning respect even from academic circles that might otherwise have dismissed a woman's expertise. As the first wildflowers bloomed across the desert floor, Amelia made a discovery that filled her with both wonder and trepidation. She was carrying their child. When she shared the news with Jackson, his face transformed with such joy that any fears she harbored melted away in the warmth of his embrace. "A baby," he repeated, awestruck, his hand gentle against her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "The spirits say it will be a boy," Amelia told him, smiling at his surprise. "They've known since before I did." Jackson chuckled, shaking his head in wonder. "Will he have the sight, do you think, like his mother?" "Perhaps," Amelia replied thoughtfully. "Or perhaps he'll have his father's way with animals or his grandfather's gift for building. Whatever gifts he brings, he'll be loved." As her pregnancy progressed, Amelia found her connection to the spirits changing subtly. They appeared less frequently, but with greater clarity when they did, as if the new life within her somehow strengthened the bridge between worlds. Jackson continued to report occasional glimpses of figure by the creek, a presence in the garden at twilight confirming that his own sensitivity was developing. In late autumn, as the cottonwood's leaves turned golden, their son was born a healthy, strong-lunged boy with his father's storm-colored eyes and his mother's determined chin. They named him Thomas, after Amelia's father, with Harlow as a middle name in honor of the professor, whose efforts had helped save their home. Judge Parker, who had become a regular visitor and something of a grandfather figure, brought gifts from the East books for the child's future education, a silver cup engraved with his name, and news that the territorial legislature had designated the cave system as an official historical preserve, ensuring its protection for generations to come. "Your son will grow up in a changing world," Parker observed, watching as Jackson cradled the infant with natural ease. "The railroad will reach Mojave within 2 years, more settlers arriving daily, the old ways fading as the new push westward." "Not all the old ways," Amelia replied, her gaze drifting toward the cottonwood where the spirits still gathered. "Some things endure if there are those who remember." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, it became clear that he possessed a special connection to the land and its invisible guardians. He often babbled happily toward empty corners where Amelia could sense spiritual presence, and animals responded to him with the same trust they showed Jackson. Life settled into rhythms both ancient and new. Jackson expanded their cattle operation enough to provide a comfortable living, while Amelia balanced motherhood with her continued stewardship of the caves. Researchers came and went, their knowledge of the site's significance growing with each visit. The town of Mojave expanded as the judge had predicted, the railroad bringing new commerce and settlers. With Baxter's corrupt influence removed, the community flourished, and gradually, Amelia found acceptance where once there had been fear and suspicion. Her knowledge of local plants and their medicinal properties brought women from town seeking her advice, and slowly, the label of Madwoman faded, replaced by healer and wise woman. On Thomas's 3rd birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Amelia found a moment of solitude by the cottonwood. The spirits were particularly visible to her that day, their ancient forms shimmering with unusual clarity in the afternoon light. "Thank you," she whispered to them, acknowledging their role in the path her life had taken. "For guiding me, for protecting this place, for leading him to me." A gentle hand on her shoulder announced Jackson's presence, communing with our ghostly friends. He asked softly, no trace of mockery in his tone. Amelia leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid strength of him. "Expressing gratitude," she corrected, "for all of this." Her gesture encompassed their home, their child playing with the judge's latest gift, the life they had built together. Jackson's arms encircled her, his chin resting on her hair. "I never thought I'd find peace after the war," he admitted quietly. "Too much blood, too many nightmares. I thought drifting was all that was left for me." "And now," she asked, though she knew the answer in the steadiness of his embrace, "now I understand what I was really seeking all those years on the trail," he replied. "Not escape, but homecoming. I just didn't know where home was until I found you." From the gathering by the house, Thomas's laughter carried to them on the breeze bright, joyful, full of the innocence they both had fought to protect. "They called me a madwoman," Amelia said, echoing words that had once held pain but now carried only the sweetness of memory. Jackson turned her in his arms, his eyes reflecting all the love that had grown between them in these years together. "Then madness is mercy," he finished, sealing the truth of it with a kiss that promised many more years to come. "The greatest mercy I've ever known."